Hey, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Good evening. Well, our comments are abled. It's funny, that doesn't sound right, does it? Disabled sounds good, but you never hear anybody say, oh, you're abled. Well, anyway, we are abled again. And let me tell you what we were told at the beginning of this. We were told that there was a new policy out that was to protect children, to protect minors from having nasty comments made. So in other words, if a video contained images or moving pictures, of course, of children, then YouTube was trying to protect them from having nasty comments by nasty people. So you could only agree with that, couldn't you? But then for our own policy, we don't, whether it be about adults, whether it be about men, women, children, dogs, cats, or whatever, we get rid of the nasty comments. So this seemed to be a no-brainer to us. Obviously, no, you wouldn't want anybody making perverted remarks about a child that was pictured in your video. So you could go along with that. But then it turned out, the way that it turned out was that they just seemed to wave a wand over the whole thing, and everything was disabled. So you couldn't, you might be talking about a diesel engine and you couldn't make a comment on it. So then it started to get silly. Now, I'm assuming that YouTube have been deluged in complaints about this review and system. That I've never understood a lot of the reviews that are put on our videos. I don't know why in this age, when there are so many computer apps to do almost everything, why anything has to be manually reviewed. And very often we would get a comment that says your video has been manually reviewed and is deemed appropriate for any advertisements. See, now, I tell you where I hope that this is going. Where I hope that this is going is that it should be possible to clean things up so that libelous, obviously this is of interest to me, libelous, slanderous, unsubstantiated slander against someone and the nasty comments that are made should not be given a platform. And that seems to me to be only one step up from trying to clean up comments that are made about children. It's not just children that need to have some kind of discipline. I believe that it's more than that. I believe that it's about common decency. If you were standing in a crowd of people and you were all talking and everything, you wouldn't be able to suddenly, well, you wouldn't last very long, would you? You suddenly come up and make a horrible, nasty comment about someone and say, oh, I understand you're this or that or the other, and not be able to substantiate that claim or statement. How long would you have a single friend? So what we have a situation where we have a lot of people who must by definition be called cowardly because they hide behind false names, false identities, so they cannot be held accountable for anything that they say. And they say terrible things and hatch plots to do this or that without any accountability at all. Now, in America, when you start to make comments and statements which can be judged as inciting hate, then you can be in trouble. You can be had for that. So if you go around and you start making comments about this color or that color of person or this race or that race or this religion or that religion, and it is deemed likely to make other people hate some section of the community, some individuals, then yeah, you can be held accountable for that. So I don't know why, just because it's gone into cyberspace, why we should lose this sense of decency. And I hope that eventually this will stop. What's, I think, very clear is that it's moving toward that. Remember, at one time, well, you may remember this or not, but at one time there was a huge to-do about how China, Far Eastern countries, were using and abusing and stealing what was called intellectual property. So if you had an idea, it could be stolen by a company, supposing you're in America or the UK, wherever. You're in a Western country and you have a brilliant idea. That brilliant idea can be taken and it can be fraudulently used. See, when you have an idea and you patent it or patent it, it becomes your idea and you are entitled to, if it's an investment, not an investment, an invention, if it's an invention, you're entitled to protect that invention, and because you spent the time working that out. You know, the most famous case that I in particular know was the Black & Decker workbench. Now, it became the Black & Decker workbench because the man who invented it just ran out of money, as far as I remember, trying to protect it from people who were stealing it and making benches that were folding in the same way. So, eventually, I believe he went to Black & Decker and said, look, let's do a deal. You can pay me so much. I'll design the workbench. We'll call it the Black & Decker workbench. You put your name on it, take the credit for it, but I will get my rightful share of that. So he didn't have to do anything. All that he did, in fact, was he just gave them the design. They went ahead, they produced it, they marketed it, they advertised it, they sold it, and he got his, whatever it was, 5%. This has been done many times, and it has a good effect because people are held accountable for what they do in cyberspace. Now, people that are doing stuff now which they think they will never be held accountable for, it may be another touch of the intellectual property thing where people eventually were held accountable. So being held accountable, you think about how things have changed. Even if you've got a 5-year-old computer, it might be more appropriate for holding the door open. It might just be a paperweight. If you think now of what you can do on an iPhone, just on an iPhone, look at what they can do on that, and what could they do 5 years ago or 10 years ago? 10 years ago, you would have, well, certainly 20 years ago, when I had a phone which was it was what was it? It was about 4 times bigger than this. I mean, it actually needed a special case to put it in, and you held it to your ear like this, and boy, you knew you were holding something after about a minute of conversation. And look at them now. This is an iPhone. It's not even a brand new one. It's an iPhone. And this is what is happening, is that things are moving forward at such an incredible rate, and in doing so they're bringing a sense of right and wrong to cyberspace. Cyberspace law at the moment is an extremely wide, almost unknown entity, situation, and they're really just coming to grips with it now, and it's going to improve, and people are going to be held accountable. YouTube turning up and saying that they want the comments, the nasty comments about children, out of the picture. Well, that's one of the first sort of indications that that's going to happen, and it is going to happen, and it's going to be widespread, and it's going to be wide-reaching. And what I believe that you will have is you will have situations where people will be held responsible for the comments that are on their site, because it will be, if someone allows a platform for vicious, poisonous comments to be made, then what they will be held accountable for eventually is that they were an accomplice. They were an accomplice. They were an accessory to something being done that they could have stopped. When people make nasty comments on my channel, I have the right and the responsibility to get rid of them, and I do. And because of that, because of the upset, what can we say, the upset egos, I've made enemies like that. We have made enemies. Most of the enemies that come onto our channel and do a thumbs down on things like a child being given the money to have a life-saving operation, and there's 9 or 10 or 15 thumbs down on such a video, then eventually things are going to change. They are going to change, and it's going to be easier either by being able to trace or being required to have identity. And so you can call yourself Happy Joe if you want to, or Bicky Bicky, or you can call yourself anything that you like in terms of a username, but eventually I believe that you'll be required to identify yourself. Do you know, it is part of, and I'm sure that I will be contradicted and corrected if I'm not correct, you know, it's against the law in the Philippines, or it's against the law to slander people and to make less of their character in the public eye. And anonymous complaints are not to be tolerated. That's what's stated in Philippine law, that anonymous complaints are, if they're not able to be validated by a correct address and so on, then they shouldn't be validated. And sooner or later, like the actress who reneged on an agreement with her employer, took herself off to Manila and started to blacken the man's name, was arrested by the police because it's against the law. Eventually, it'll be payback time for those who think that they are beyond the law when they're quoting the law. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. I'm very happy that our comments are now abled. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.